I arrived at my uncle's house on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. He greeted me with his usual gentle smile and a warm hug. Uncle David had always been like a second father, calm, slow-moving, always tired but full of kindness. His voice was soft, his laugh even softer. It had been years since I'd stayed over, and he seemed excited, though a little weaker than I remembered. He mentioned his new blood pressure medication was making him sleep more than usual. Most nights, he was in bed by 8. Aunt Clara was radiant as ever, smartly dressed, welcoming, and strangely affectionate. She hugged me tightly and commented on how much I'd grown. Something about her felt different this time. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling. She hovered around me, laughed too easily, touched my arm when she spoke. Maybe it was just her way of being warm. I brushed it off. That evening, we sat down to dinner. Clara had made roast chicken, salad, and baked potatoes. David hardly spoke, nodding off a little between bites. Clara kept the conversation going, asking about my job, my love life, my plans. She poured me an extra glass of wine and joked about how David couldn't hold his liquor anymore. I smiled, but the way she looked at me felt like something more than amusement. Later, David excused himself to bed, muttering something about his pills. Clara and I stayed at the table. She leaned on her elbow, twirling her wine glass. "He's not much fun in the evenings anymore," she said, smiling faintly. "But I suppose we all get old." A little past 10, there was a knock on the front door. Clara jumped up quickly and opened it. A man stood there, tall, athletic, casually dressed. "Brandon," she said brightly, "you made it." Brandon glanced over and gave me a polite nod. "Friend from yoga," Clara explained. "He's helping me with a little charity event." It was late for charity talk, I thought, but I didn't. "Say anything." They went into the living room while I lingered in the hallway, pretending to scroll on my phone. Their voices dropped low. Laughs. A pause. Then silence. I went upstairs, pretending not to notice the way Brandon's shoes were still at the door. The next morning, David was reading the paper at the table. Clara hummed while making eggs. Brandon's shoes were gone. Uncle David looked up. "Sleep, okay?" "Yeah," I said, but I didn't. Something wasn't right. The next few days felt off. Clara was constantly on the move. She'd say she needed groceries, then come back with one bag and no receipt. She claimed she was helping organize a fundraiser, yet every time she left, it wasn't in a rush or with purpose. It was quiet, like slipping away. David never questioned her. He'd wave from the couch or mumble something as he dozed off in his recliner. The man trusted her completely. One afternoon, Clara said she had a spa appointment and left wearing jeans and sneakers. It didn't add up. I watched from the window as she got into her car and drove off. An hour later, I took a walk around the block, trying not to think too much. Jenny, the neighbor, waved me over. She was friendly, talkative, the type who knew everyone's schedule without ever looking nosy. She said, "Clara and that guy from the other night, what's his name, Brandon? They make a cute couple." I pretended to be confused. "You mean her friend?" Jenny laughed. "If that's what they're calling it these days. I saw them at the cafe last week, holding hands, sharing a muffin. Sweet, but risky. David doesn't notice?" I gave a vague shrug, thanked her, and walked away. My chest was tight. I didn't want to believe it, but Clara was getting careless. Or maybe she didn't care at all. That night, I told Clara I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. I left the light off, sat by the window, and waited. At 9:42 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. Headlights off. Brandon. Clara let him in, barely a whisper between them. I stepped into the hallway and stood still, ears straining. They passed my room quietly. Down the hall, the guest room door clicked shut. Then, muffled sounds. Low voices, the kind that don't care about being caught. A giggle. Then a moan. It didn't last long before I heard the rhythm of something unmistakable. I didn't want to hear it, but I couldn't move. Clara's voice, soft and breathless, whispering his name. Brandon. Down the hall, David's door was still closed. He was asleep. No idea what was happening just 20 feet away. I clenched my fists. My blood boiled, but I stayed still, my phone in my hand. I didn't record. I didn't move. I just listened to my uncle being betrayed in his own house. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, the sounds echoing in my head. In the morning, Clara acted like nothing happened. She wore a light blue robe, humming to herself, making pancakes. David walked in moments later, kissed her, cheek, and sat down like every other morning. He smiled at me, asked about my plans for the day, completely unaware that his wife had another man in their home hours earlier. I answered with something short. I couldn't look at her. Later that day, I stepped out and called Jenny. I asked about what she'd seen again. She confirmed it wasn't the first time. "I've seen him come and go more than once," she said. "Sometimes in the middle of the night. I thought maybe it was a cousin or something at first. But that's not how cousins behave." Her voice was casual, unaware of the weight each word carried. I went back and walked past Clara in the hallway. She smiled at me like we shared a secret. I wanted to confront her, but I knew she'd just lie. Or worse, she'd twist it into something it wasn't. She was too calm, too polished. She knew exactly what she was doing. That evening, I sat on the back porch while David watered the plants. He talked about retirement, said he was planning to take Clara on a road trip next month. "Just the two of us," he said with a small grin. "She's been so patient with me lately. I want to do something nice." I nodded, forcing a smile. It burned to hear him speak like that, full of trust. It wasn't patience Clara was practicing. It was deception. That night, I stayed up again. This time I waited with the door slightly open. At 10:07, the doorbell rang. Soft voices, light footsteps, then silence. I stepped into the hallway and walked toward the guest room. I paused inches from the door. Then I heard it, again. The same rhythm, the same breathy whispers, Clara's voice. No hesitation, no shame. I held my phone up, recording a few seconds of audio. It was more than enough. Then a toilet flushed. David. He was up. I panicked. I rushed to the bathroom, intercepting him before he could go any further down the hall. I made up a story about hearing noises outside. He mumbled, nodded, and went back to bed. I stood there, heart racing, with the proof in my phone and the truth locked inside me. The next morning, I avoided Clara. I couldn't stand her voice, her smile, the way she poured coffee like nothing was wrong. David was cheerful, flipping through the newspaper, asking about weekend plans. I nodded along, answering with short phrases, barely managing to speak. My hands shook every time I looked at him. I considered showing him the audio, just hitting play and watching everything unravel. But the idea of his face breaking, his trust collapsing in front of me, it paralyzed me. He wasn't just an uncle. He was good, steady. One of the last people I knew who still believed in loyalty. I hated that I was holding his peace hostage. Later, that day, Clara found me alone. She sat across from me with her legs crossed, sipping tea. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then, almost playfully, she said, "You've been quiet lately." I looked at her, searching her face for guilt. There was none. She wasn't worried. She was calculating. She knew I knew, and she didn't care. Maybe she thought I wouldn't say anything. Maybe she was right. That night, I packed my bag. My visit was supposed to last 2 weeks. I was leaving early. I sat at the desk in the guest room and wrote a letter. It was simple. I told David I was sorry. I told him to listen to the audio on the USB drive I left with the letter. I told him I didn't want to be the one to break his heart, but he deserved to know. I placed the envelope under his pillow. I didn't say goodbye. I left before sunrise, before Clara woke up, before anything else could stop me. I walked out, into the cold morning air with a tight chest and a blank mind. I never heard back. A week later, I got a message from Jenny. She said she saw Clara outside crying while loading bags into her car. David stood in the doorway, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I don't know what he said. I don't know what happened next. But I do know that sometimes silence isn't protection. It's poison. And even when the truth hurts more than anything, it still deserves a voice. I gave him that voice. What he did with it, I'll never know.